we might need now. We don't want anyone to die, but there was this Netflix documentary about when someone put cyanide in Tylenol tablets, and Johnson & Johnson had to go into like full defense mode. We need something that is going to tank Johnson & Johnson to get Woody Johnson to move.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Liam Barwick. This is another edition of Moving the Goalposts. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network across social media at ETB Network. You can follow this show across social media at MTGP ETB. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DMart. You can follow Liam at Liam MTGP. You can watch all Empty the Bench shows on YouTube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on ETBpodcast.com. And make sure to like and subscribe. And you can listen to this show, Moving the Goalposts, wherever you get your podcasts. So, and of course, this show is on Moving the Goalposts is presented by Playback. Stay tuned for later in the show to find out more. All right. So, Liam is back. We have a whole lot of Knicks discussion to talk about. Namely, it's all going to be hot stove stuff with the Knicks right now about getting Durant or Giannis. And one of these acquisitions seems very likely at this point. I don't know what's going to happen either way, but it seems like Leon Rose will probably make one of these things happen. The question is, now there's a few questions. One is, which is more likely to happen and which is better? I mean, to me, I think it's obvious that Giannis is a better option. I'd rather have Giannis than Durant. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I don't even think Kevin Durant would disagree with that. But I think Durant is more likely. I think it's more likely Durant becomes a Knick than Giannis becomes a Knick. Because, look, because everybody's talking about Giannis and Giannis becoming a Knick and all that. The problem is we're only looking at it from the Knicks standpoint. Whereas with Durant, you could kind of look at it from the perspective of both teams. We can sort of hope that the Bucks will agree to whatever like trade offer we give them. But it's like when we're like brainstorming the possibilities, it doesn't seem very likely the Bucks will agree to it. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't. Like I don't think we have enough to get the Bucks to agree to a trade. Now I saw Bill Simmons talking about it. And he brought up the idea of there being like a three-way trade, which I could see happening. I feel like that's the only way Giannis will become a Knick would be if there's some type of three-way trade. But to me, Durant on the Knicks is much more likely. And I will say because Giannis being on the Knicks, I think I would be really gung-ho about. Durant on the Knicks, I am a lot more hesitant about it. Not that I actively don't want Durant. He's still probably a borderline top 20 player in the NBA right now. But I think that the Knicks, I could see it being a losing trade, given the Knicks will have to give up a lot. I don't know what your thoughts are on this whole thing.
Well, I think that the Giannis would be a bigger losing trade because I think they'd have to give up a lot more, especially in terms of depth. But yeah, I agree with what you said. Like for me, a couple of things. Like it doesn't really make sense to me. So like I think both guys are going to get traded. I think that's pretty obvious. Whether where they get traded is going to be the question. But for me, a lot of the name that's been thrown around for Giannis is Towns, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense from Milwaukee's perspective, because if Milwaukee is going to trade Giannis, then they're probably just going to blow everything up because they're not going to be as competitive without him. Who knows what Lillard's status is? Not very good for playing next year. So I don't really know if just straight up swapping Towns for Giannis makes sense from Milwaukee's perspective.
Well, the Knicks would have to give up more than just Towns to get Giannis.
Yeah, but the point is, I think they want like future collateral, right, not now. And Towns would be sort of a similar swap for them as Giannis. I think it makes them a little bit worse. Just Towns for Giannis, which doesn't they want to be a lot worse probably, and have some sort of future assets. So I do think that the Suns makes more sense. I could see out of both. If you said one of these guys is going to stay at his current team, I would much more see Giannis end up staying in Milwaukee than I would see Durant end up staying in the Suns. So I think Durant is definitely out, which I think is a little bit better for the Knicks. I think it gives them a little bit more leverage. Where I think Giannis is going to leave, but I don't think he's as out as Durant. But I think that if the Knicks can somehow keep Towns, which I don't think they'd be able to do with Giannis, I think they would be able to do with Durant. I think that would be very beneficial for them. And then if Bridges is one of the guys that they end up trading for Durant, then in the end they essentially swap those 5 picks for Durant, which I wouldn't hate. This picks that they traded the Nets for Bridges. So I think I would rather. I don't know who I would rather, but I think that Durant is more likely. And I do think that one of the Knicks' biggest problems was that they didn't have an extra scorer to go to. And that is a big issue. Now, I think that Giannis would be a good fit, but if you give up Giannis for Towns, I don't know how gigantic of a difference, have a step forward you're making. You're making a step forward, but
I think it's a pretty big step forward.
Giannis
Giannis
what they give up.
Right. No, I agree. I think there is a scenario in which the Knicks get Giannis and they're in a really bad position, namely lack of depth. I think that either of these guys could be the next shiny object.
Right.
Well, you know what I mean? Either of these guys could be that if you don't look past it at face value. I mean, if the Knicks can keep Cat and get Durant, I would probably prefer that over the Knicks not being able to keep Cat and getting Giannis, because there's no way the Knicks there's no way the Knicks are going to be able to keep Cat and get Giannis.
No.
Now, to me, I think that I was talking about moving on from Cat after the Knicks lost to the Pacers, and it's not because I hate Cat or anything like that. I think he's a very good player, and I think they made the right move to trade him. But just that, given the opportunity right now, I'd be willing to move on from him. The question is, would you be willing to move on from Cat to get Durant? And for that, I am a lot more hesitant about. Yeah. In fact, Cat probably had a better year than Durant did this past season. The only thing about Durant is that I think he's a better fit with Brunson than Towns is in a lot of ways.
I agree.
Because he's just a very good spot-up scorer, and he's not as much of a liability on defense as Towns is.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, so in a sense, I think he fits better. But I mean, Cat definitely had a better year. Look, if we can give up Bridges and some draft picks for Durant, a lot of people are actually saying, and they were talking about this on The Fan, that the Knicks giving up all those draft picks for Bridges could have ended up hurting our chances of getting Giannis. Which I think is somewhat true, but at the same time, at the time they kind of had to make the move.
Hindsight is 2020. I mean,
you can't say, well, in a year, what if it's possible that maybe we can get Giannis? Nobody was thinking that a year ago when they did it.
Right.
So I still think it would have been the right move. But yeah, look, if the Knicks can somehow keep Cat and get Durant, I'm probably going to be all for it. But I don't know if they're going to be able to. I don't know if they're going to. I doubt they're going to be able to do that. Do you really think that that's going to be a realistic possibility?
I think that's more realistic than keeping Cat and getting Giannis. Yeah.
More realistic.
The thing is, I think that the Suns are in a way worse position with Durant than the Bucks are with Giannis, where I feel like the Suns are there's almost no leverage for the Suns. I mean, they have a player that does not want to be there, that was going to get out, whatever. I think Giannis is sort of similar, but like I said earlier, I would be more inclined to seeing Giannis stay and then figuring out. I mean, Giannis has never left. We have a lot of history of Durant leaving places. So
Durant leaves. Not only does Durant leave, he requests to leave.
Right. And that's not a problem for the Knicks because by the time that he would get to that point, he would be too old anyway.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
That aspect doesn't hurt the Knicks, but yeah, it's something that I think is possible with the Suns more so than the Bucks, and I do think that the Suns are in a more like could win position if they add a couple players than the Bucks are without Durant than the Bucks are without Giannis.
Yeah, that's probably true. A lot of it depends on the status of.
I mean, the Suns still have two. Yeah, but the Suns still have two good players outside of where the Bucks have one that's been hurt.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, I do think that both is possible. But the only thing that is sort of, again, like you said about the shiny object, the only thing that is a problem is we had a bad bench this year too that wasn't very helpful in the playoffs. So is it kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face, trading away bench players to add, or significant bench players to add a scorer if they're not going to improve the bench in the end?
Well, yeah, that's the question. They're going to have to improve the bench. Well, who would you trade away? First of all, our bench is only two guys deep.
Right.
We got Robinson and McBride. That's pretty much it.
And depth is underrated in the NBA. I mean, the Suns underrated.
I mean, first of all, part of the reason the Celtics were such a super team last year is because of the depth.
Right.
That was probably the biggest. I mean, you look at the Golden State Warriors teams,
yep.
Amazing depth. All of them have had amazing depth. The Knicks have terrible depth. And that's the biggest, and Indiana, that's the biggest, in my view, that's probably the biggest reason Indiana won, was because Indiana just had better depth. They have better players and more of them. And that, I think, it's obviously very much underrated. And you can get a superstar player and not have, and if your depth isn't good, you're probably not winning a championship.
Right.
I mean, either way, I feel like it would be possible to improve the bench and still, I mean, like even if we were to get Giannis or Durant, would McBride or Robinson be included in that trade? I would say probably not, right?
Yeah, I would agree. Probably not.
Probably not. So in that case, the bench isn't all that bad. Maybe if the bench improves a little bit, they can maybe sign a couple of guys for a low price.
They have to do. No matter what.
So I guess that really, I don't know though. I feel like if the Knicks can get Durant, and I think you said it's more realistic for the Knicks to be able to keep Towns and get Durant than Giannis. I would say there's roughly a 0% chance the Knicks can keep Cat and get Giannis, and maybe a 2% chance the Knicks can keep Cat and get Durant. Like I don't think it. I guess you're right in the sense that the Suns have a lot less leverage than the Bucks do.
And I think the Suns would be more interested in Bridges than the Bucks would too.
That's also
true. Had Bridges. They liked him when he was there, but he ended up going to Brooklyn because of Durant. Ironically. But yeah, I think that the chances are better, and I would be more like I would be much more like I don't know what the right word is, but I would feel much more comfortable giving up Bridges than I would giving up Towns. Like if they lost Towns, even if they got Giannis, I'd still be like, But if you gave up Bridges, I'd be more inclined. I mean, Bridges was not good. Bridges was supposed to be the third guy, and he really turned out to be the fourth guy in the playoffs.
Depending on the series
for him.
The problem with Bridges is that he was such an inefficient scorer this year. He was really inefficient. And, we have him, like the reason that he's there is to hit these mid-range and these mid-range shots and threes in transition. And he wasn't able to do it. There were a lot of times in the series against the Celtics when he hit really big shots and made really good defensive plays, but that's only because he shot terribly for the rest of the game. And so it's almost like he was cleaning up his own mess. Like, yeah, he hit big shots. Well, maybe he wouldn't have had to hit such big shots if he had made a couple shots earlier in the game. Some of them seemingly pretty easy shots. So he was very inefficient. I mean, I'd be willing to move on from him. I'd also be willing to move on from Josh Hart. I don't know. Like, people are talking about trading Bridges. But I'd be willing to move. Look, I think anybody on that roster outside of Brunson is totally tradable. I'd be willing to move on from.
Agreed.
But Josh Hart, I would totally trade in a heartbeat. I know he's a Nova Knicks guy, but it's like I would be willing to do it. I think he's so overrated.
And I think the Nova Knicks thing is overrated too.
You think so?
Just in terms of
In terms of I don't know. I don't think it's overrated. I think it's a little bit like the OMG Mets thing. I think it's a really cool thing that these college roommates or college teammates ended up playing together in the pros.
But in terms of helping them, they went a year further after they traded one of the Nova Knicks. They went around further.
Oh, yeah. Look, I'm not married to the Nova Knicks thing. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if you break up all the Nova guys. I don't care if next year we don't have Josh Hart or Bridges. Like, I'd be fine with either of those. Even both of them not being here. But, I mean, I still always thought it was a really cool thing.
Yeah. I'm saying in terms of helping them win.
But, I think the question, though, is do you think Durant wants to be back in New York?
Yes.
You think he does? Okay.
Yeah.
There were also a lot of questions about whether or not Giannis wants to be in New York.
Well, I don't know about that, but I have seen a podcast with Durant where he had said that you don't realize New York is the greatest city in the world until you actually live there and stuff like that. So I think he would be much more inclined. And Durant is more of like a celebrity person than Giannis, which is important for guys that want to play in New York.
Do you think international players would likely be less inclined to play in New York?
No. I don't think it really matters. No, I think I don't think that really matters. But I don't think that either of them are declines playing in New York. And I think that the drawbacks of playing in New York are also like some of are sort of like a double. It's like double-edged sword. Well, yeah, but because for instance, you're looking at it like how much you're criticized, how much attention's on you, but then like you can see like how Brunson is treated, like what happened after they beat the Celtics in the streets and stuff. And that's sort of a difference. Like, if you play in Detroit or for the Heat, like you're not on first take every day, but you also don't get that experience either. Right. I think that would help. I think that Giannis, if I had to pick where he would probably be best to go, would probably be the Heat.
Why do you say Miami?
I don't know. I just feel like he's a good fit there.
Like you mean on a personal level or like on a basketball level?
Basketball, and then he'd also put on Twitter that he'd said his favorite road city was New York, but then they asked him someone asked him where he would like to live, and he said any of the Florida cities. So
yeah,
that could have also just been like Twitter trolling, but I do think that that's one place that it could be. And yeah, I mean, I just think that it doesn't really matter with the international players, but yeah, I think that Durant will be more inclined. And if Durant's already lived here, and his like a lot of his like a few of the companies that he's involved with like a boardroom and stuff is in New York, and his agent, who he's good friends with, is based in New York. So yeah, I think Durant would be more inclined.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And also, do you think he may also want to go back to New York to sort of, now I know it's a different team, to sort of improve his I don't know, repair his reputation, as opposed to just being viewed as a failure? Because that's kind of what he's viewed as in New York.
I'll say this, let me lose. Okay, if this makes sense in terms of legacy, this is going to sound whatever, but winning a title with the Knicks is would be worth winning 2 titles with the Heat, legacy wise. To bring a title to a team for the first time in
50 years,
55 years or whatever, that's more worth legacy wise than like winning. Like if it's very similar to me. Like if Aaron Rodgers had won a Super Bowl with the Jets, it would be more impactful legacy wise than if he wins it with the Steelers this year.
Right.
And you sort of repair a franchise,
or like LeBron winning with the Cavs.
Right.
First of all,
people think of that before they think of the Heat ones. And he won way more.
And also, we all know how. But like the thing is, because he's viewed like in New York because of his time on Brooklyn, and I'm not saying it's 100% his fault, but he is generally viewed as sort of he's viewed in New York in a similar way to the way Aaron Rodgers is viewed, I think.
Right, but except I mean, I agree with that. Except they're so vastly different. But and when you said it's not a lot of them, I would say close to none of it was his fault. Maybe the breakup was his fault. But people forget he had the most points ever scored in a Game 7 in the game they lost.
Well, the thing is that team could have been so good if not for the inmates running the asylum.
Well, they could have been good, and also like he had in that game, obviously they should have won if his foot was a little smaller, but he had no Kyrie Irving at all, and James Harden was essentially not playing. He was playing, but he was injured. He missed every shot he took in the game. So none of that was Durant's fault, but I agree that he's seen as a failure. I think, and I think one thing like is like there was so much failure with that Nets team. Like the bigger failure with Rodgers is that like not only was it a failure, but he was constantly speaking every week. And so that was like a bigger deal. And also the Jets are they're not a big brother team, but the Jets are a bigger team that in New York than the Nets are. So I think that was, and also Durant did take them to the playoffs a couple times. Rodgers didn't do anything here, but it is seen as that, and I do think that would help fix stuff, especially with the Knicks. Like if he came back on with the Nets, it wouldn't really matter. But to win with the Knicks is different.
Yeah, but like the point, like I agree with everything you said. That like him and Aaron Rodgers are very different in terms of what they did in New York. I'm just saying that their reputations are somewhat similar.
Right. I'm saying that would be kind of I agree with that. I'm just saying that it's not a fair characterization because Durant did a lot more, and Durant did a lot more with that. Would be like it would sort of be like if like Garrett Wilson and Hall and Sauce and got injured and Rodgers put up like insane numbers, because that's kind of what Durant did. He had nobody and put up numbers. And they were another team, by the way, who gave up, like we were talking about earlier, they gave up a lot of depth, namely guys like Jared Allen and stuff, to get Harden. And that's one of the reasons why they were so straddled by those two injuries, was they didn't really have depth. And also, if you remember, I mean, as good as Durant was in that Game 7, that's as bad as Joe Harris was in that Game 7.
Joe Harris. Yeah. Oh my God, he was terrible. Joe Harris. That's a name that will live in infamy.
Well, because he was actually a good player for that. He was a good role player for them. And then that game was just insane.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like the thing is, when you talk about like legacy, Durant seems to be more obsessed with what people think of him than most professional athletes. I guess I would argue that is the biggest difference between Durant and Rodgers, which is that Durant is obsessed with what people think of him and Rodgers just doesn't care. Like, I think that does seem to me like the biggest difference. And Durant, you don't think that's true?
Yeah, except I think that Rodgers, I don't know if I know what you mean by that, but I think Rodgers does sort of like, I think the way that Durant talks to people directly on Twitter, Rodgers does it a little bit like Rodgers pays attention to a lot of stuff that's said.
That's true. That's true. He doesn't do it directly.
Like, for instance, with the Jimmy Kimmel thing, Jimmy Kimmel already had probably made it obvious he didn't like Aaron Rodgers or stuff that had been said. And I don't think that if Jimmy Kimmel hadn't been sort of made that obvious, I don't think he would have made that joke. I think that he does pay attention to stuff like that.
That's true. That's true. But I think it's more like, I guess it's just sort of in different ways. I think Aaron Rodgers views certain people as enemies.
Yeah.
In a sense, more so than Durant does, if that makes sense.
Well, I think also another difference is that he that Rodgers views like people that are like a like maybe like a Manish Mehta or something, or a Ralph Vacchiano, or a guy on ESPN, a Louis Riddick, as an enemy if they talk about him. Where Durant, thinks NetFan 69420 on Twitter.
Yeah,
that's a difference.
Yeah, that's true. I guess Aaron Rodgers has a little bit more of a reason to care about the people that he talks about, in a sense, because they're always like powerful people. And usually, in fairness to Rodgers, most of the time it seems like when he feuds with people, they kind of started it. Whereas with Durant, it's like you said, it's with random users on Twitter, which could be like burner accounts.
Which is like the difference. Which is like the big difference. But I do think that they both, like care about more what people think of them more than a lot of similar athletes. Which, by the way, I just wanted to point out, it's the pinned tweet from PFT commenter, which he pinned saying it's the greatest tweet. I kind of agree. Was somebody said, "Just relax" to Durant one time on Twitter, and he said, "There's no relax, champ. No relax when I'm on Twitter. I'm on 10 until the second I close the app. You relax all time."
It's like the most Durant thing. Yeah, you would think that. Yeah, it is unbelievable how sensitive he is. But that goes back to my point, which is that he cares what people think of him. You best believe that he cares what the city of New York thinks of him.
Right.
The biggest market in the country. So that could really be, and maybe he wants to potentially win a title with the Knicks. Now, it feels like a pipe dream no matter who comes to the Knicks to win a championship.
Yeah. But I do think that there'll be a clearer field next year. I think that the biggest team is getting out of the way. I think Boston's going to not be a factor next year.
Right.
They're going to trade a lot of. They have to move a lot of cap room around. Jason Tatum, it looks like, is not going to play most of the season, at least,
if at all.
If at all. At least. So I think Boston's out of the way. I think Cleveland is good. Cleveland have been good in the regular season for a few years in a row now, and just not proven it in the playoffs at all. And I think that if the Knicks added Durant and don't give up too much insane capital, I would still think they're better than Cleveland. I think Indiana is really good, and they're coming into there. I think, but besides that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know who else is even in the conversation. If the Bucks,
I think there's, what team I think is going to be much better in the East next year is going to be Detroit.
Yeah, I just don't see them up. I agree. I just don't know if they're up onto that level quite yet.
I don't think they're going to win the East, but I think, look, they were a 6th seed this year and they gave the Knicks a lot of trouble. I think they're going to improve tremendously because they were a young team.
The year before that, they lost 30 in a row, so they made a huge jump. So if they make a huge jump again,
literally, if you go by that logic, they're on track to be the champions next year.
Right. But I just do think that. I just think in the East, and I think we're going to sort of see like that. I mean, the Pacers and the Knicks met 6 times in 8 years in the 90s, between the 90s and start of the 2000s, and I think we're probably going to see something like that again.
Yeah, only in sports can there be a rivalry between New York City and Indiana.
Yeah.
That is like the most sports thing.
I mean,
it's almost only, it could almost only be a basketball thing.
Right. And I think that, I think that we're going to see something like that again, which is also why I kind of hated, to me, one of the stupidest narratives from about 10 years ago, but maybe less than that, was, it's always the Cavs and the Warriors. It's always the Cavs and the Warriors. Sports produces – the Chiefs and the Bills have played 5 straight years. I mean, the Stanley Cup Final is a repeat of what it was last year. Sports produces teams that are good at the same times. So they're going to play each other in the postseason often.
Right. And I also don't hate repeats. Like, to me, the Cavs and Warriors rivalry was like my favorite time in the NBA. Like,
Right.
I never missed a game of those fights. Now, part of it's because I was younger and had a lot of time on my hands, but like, I would not miss a game of the NBA
Yeah.
finals or of the NBA playoffs at the time because I was just so glued to my TV to watch that. And before people say it's like it's the same teams, the storyline, the rosters, everything is different every year.
Yeah. And to me, the funny thing was a lot of that was coming from people that were hockey fans. And because hockey has one of the stupidest playoff formats I've ever seen in my life, the hockey playoffs are like the same every year. I think like because of the way that they play it, where the second team in the division plays the third team in the division. That's like I think like Tampa and Florida have played like 6 straight years in the playoffs or something. So like it's insane. So I hate when people do that. That it's the same matchups. Yeah, because both teams are good, and you don't hear it. You don't hear it when the Chiefs play the Bills. I mean, and that happens every year.
Well, the reason you don't hear it is because it's not the Super Bowl. If the Chiefs played, if they were in opposite conferences and they played,
I agree. If the 49ers won the NFC last year, then you might have heard it again. Oh, this is the 5th time they've played or whatever. And you do hear people do have Chiefs fatigue, and people did have Patriot fatigue. But
I think the quote unquote fatigue, and people said it about the Golden State Warriors too. I think like sports fatigue is very overstated and a very in the moment thing. Like it's not something you look back on and then think about. Like nobody looks back on the Cavs Warriors and thinks of fatigue. Now we look back on it and think that was amazing.
Right. And nobody said like imagine like people being like, oh my God, like it's Federer versus Nadal again. Like no, we're probably going to have Sinner versus Alcaraz a million times in the next 10 years. Like, yeah, but if I go to the U.S. Open or I'm watching the U.S. Open, I want to see Federer and Nadal 12 years ago.
And by the way, I think that's what most people believe. Like, I think there is a huge gap between what the public says and what the public actually believes. And what the public actually believes when you look at ratings.
Absolutely, especially like. Yeah, and it doesn't matter because I think that this is a good matchup. I think you have 2 great teams in the NBA Finals, and I don't think we had all the information out for Game 2, but Game 1 was the lowest rated NBA Final game since they started collecting ratings.
Yeah.
So it does. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't really matter. I mean, nobody wanted to see. I mean, the Super Bowl is a different animal, but most people probably, and it was a terrible game, so I guess it's not a great example, but most people probably would have rather seen that Chiefs Eagles than Commanders and Bills.
Yeah, probably. I think that, that's probably true. I mean, the Chiefs are a really popular team nationally, and they have a very big, I would say, bandwagon fan base.
Right.
And the Eagles are, Philadelphia is one of the biggest football cities in the country. And they have a whole big rabid fan base. And also, I think the Eagles this last season were a very good sort of underdog story in a sense, even though they were very much favorites in a sense. But like the players individually, like Jalen Hurts is the ultimate underdog story. Like it's better than the Michael Jordan got cut his freshman year of basketball story. You know what I mean? Like he was at Alabama. Everybody thought he stunk. They replaced him with Tua at halftime.
I think that makes sense once they got to the Super Bowl. But when they were going to the Super Bowl, they were gigantic favorites against every team they played.
Right.
But yeah,
No. I'm not saying the Eagles as a team. I'm saying the players.
Yeah. It makes sense. Yeah.
We're very, or at least Hurts, I think, very much is an underdog story. And I know it sucks for Giant fans that Saquon Barkley ended up on the Eagles and won a Super Bowl. But to that, I would say, look, I don't think the Giants deserve Saquon Barkley. Like he's just too good of a player to dwindle away on a terrible team.
Well,
like,
go ahead. No, I was going to say the best player, your best franchise player, going to your biggest Super Bowl and going to your biggest rival and winning a Super Bowl also happens to the Jets. So I mean, yeah.
So, but I would say like I prefer it when great players. I mean, basketball's different because a great player will make a team a lot better. But in football and baseball, that's not always the case. I think it's good that Otani's on the Dodgers rather than the Angels. I think it's good that Saquon Barkley's on the Eagles instead of the Giants.
Right.
Because, like, I don't know. I don't want another Barry Sanders type of thing where he retires early because he's on a terrible team.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't think I just don't think any of that is good for the sport. In terms of the NBA Finals, people are talking about ratings and things like that. It is weird to me how people talk about ratings, but they only talk about it when they're bad. I mean, ratings are naturally going to fluctuate. Sports is entertainment, but it's also not scripted. Right. And it's not even like reality TV where producers create situations out of nothing. Look, sometimes it's going to happen where ratings are going to go up and they're going to go down.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can really do about it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the ratings don't tell the whole story because there's also streaming and
like I don't know how, like, I mean, maybe they could tell me, but I don't know how ratings and stuff accounts for sports bars and people going over to people's house to watch stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how the ratings generate that stuff, but I mean, there's so much stuff within the ratings. I mean, first of all, ratings, viewers, besides football, viewers for everything have gone down. Everything on television. No, people just don't watch TV like that anymore. And like a lot of people forget, like when the World Series was getting like 100 million viewers or 70 million viewers, there was 3 channels on TV. So like you were watching that or you were watching nothing. So, there's the other factors are there's no big market team. There's no like national team where it's like not just a big market, but like the Celtics would be a draw, the Warriors would be a draw, the Lakers would be a draw. Oklahoma City and Indiana both have stars who are not household names across the country yet.
Not yet, at least.
The other issue is that New York City has 9 million people just in New York City. The combined entire states of Indiana and Oklahoma is 10 million. So the combined states is just barely over what New York City's only the city population is. The metro area has much more. So, the Knicks would have been a big difference in those ratings. And so certain things matter, but these new group of stars hasn't made it to the level of, what a Curry or LeBron was in 2016. I mean, it makes difference. Like in the market thing, I mean, Cleveland is an extremely small market. There's more people in Newark, New Jersey than live in Cleveland. So the fact that they got big ratings is because of LeBron. So the NBA is a very star-driven league. The NBA is like the opposite of the MLB and hockey, where I think that it matters. But in today's day and age, I really don't think it much matters where a star went. Like we talked about, LeBron was a really big star in Cleveland. I mean, Miami is a known city, but it's not it has 600,000 people in it or something. So I think that the NBA is more star driven. So in a few years when SGA is a big star, or even when Durant was on Oklahoma City, they were a draw. I just think that those stars haven't made it into the zeitgeist of casual fans yet.
Yeah, and I also don't think SGA has the personality of like somebody who wants, like, I feel like or the play style that is extremely captivating. I mean, he's a great player, obviously. This is not a knock on his play.
He's really annoying to watch, though, sometimes as well.
Yeah, he's a huge.
You can make that argument about Brunson as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But like, if you look at somebody like Anthony Edwards, and Anthony Edwards is not on the level of SGA, but Anthony Edwards reminds people of Michael Jordan and Kobe. He's a high flyer. He's very flashy. He's very fun to watch, and he has a personality where he doesn't even try to do this, but he has that type of personality where he's a very big draw. Like he's in a lot more commercials than SGA is.
Right.
So I wouldn't say he's a household name just yet, but I do think that somebody like Anthony Edwards is a bit more marketable than SGA, even though SGA is very clearly a better player right now than Anthony Edwards is. And the Pacers don't have any big stars. Like they don't have a Durant, a LeBron. They don't have anything like that.
And these things fluctuate. Like, for instance, 2 years ago, it was the Diamondbacks and the Rangers in the World Series, and it got awful ratings, and people said, "Oh, look at that, MLB is in trouble." And what happened the next year? It was the Dodgers and the Yankees. So these things fluctuate, and then it really does depend. And baseball and hockey are in worse positions to have small market teams, or not even like Phoenix and Dallas are not small markets by some comparison, but they're not the Dodgers and the Yankees. Where like the Dodgers and the Yankees will draw people from out of New York and LA.
Right.
People will watch them.
I mean, like in football, you can have a bunch. Like in football, it doesn't even matter at all. It seems like. I mean, you look at
Buffalo and Kansas City play in the AFC Championship. Those are the two smallest markets in football.
And not just the NFL, but also college football. The most popular teams are all small markets.
Right.
Like all of them.
It's a little different because like the small market, being in a small market almost helps college football teams. Like the fact that there's no pro teams in Alabama or Kentucky or whatever is helpful to them.
Being in an ultra small market, not just an ultra small market.
Like a lot of states in the SEC, I think most states in the SEC have either none or very little pro sports teams.
Right. I mean, Alabama doesn't have any. Mississippi doesn't have any.
Right.
Louisiana has the Saints, but I feel like I don't know how popular they are throughout the whole state.
Right. I mean, and
Mississippi and Alabama have none. South Carolina has none.
Right.
Florida has three, but Florida's such a big state. They're not popular throughout the whole state.
Right. Well, just like same with Texas. Like it's such a big state, but we're like College Station is nowhere near the Cowboys or the Texans.
Right. Right. And those programs. I mean, it's a little different now with NIL and things like that, but college football, it still is a little bit, but it used to be very, very geographic driven.
Right. It matters like about the pro fans too. Like for instance, I was in Phoenix area in November when ASU went and won the Big 12, and it was like the top story of every newscast, and you just saw ASU stuff everywhere. Where like you wouldn't see that if the Cardinals were making a run. I've been there when the Cardinals have made a run, or the Suns make a run. Like that. Like Arizona is like a place where like there's a lot of people that have moved there, and a lot of warm weather cities just don't have great fan bases. And I think one of the reasons is like Florida, Los Angeles, Phoenix, like have a lot of people that move there from other places as well. And so college football is bigger in some of these areas.
Including with people that don't go to college or didn't go to that college.
I mean, I think like, what is it? Like there was some stats, 75% of SEC fans didn't go to the school.
Yeah, which by the way, people criticize that a lot, but to me, it's like, I think it makes sense because if you don't have any pro teams, like what else is there to root for? I mean, look, I'm a St. John's fan. I didn't go to St. John's. I just root for St. John's because they're just another Queens team that goes pretty well with all the other teams I root for.
I mean, that makes sense. I do kind of hate when like people are just like I grew up in New Jersey, and I'm a huge Ohio State fan for no reason at all, and then act like it's like life and death, or Notre Dame is the biggest one. But
Notre Dame has the most Notre Dame has the most mysterious fans. Like a lot of people are Notre Dame fans just because they're Irish.
Correct. Yeah.
and have no connection to the school.
Yeah. So like I get it more in the SEC, but I do kind of hate like some of that bandwagon stuff, and then like pretend it's like the biggest thing. But the overall like arching, it makes sense, especially when you live in these places. And Mississippi's, Alabama's, whatever. But yeah, it's going to get good ratings. And the fact is, football is just built. There's so many things about football that are built for it to be better ratings. It's better on television. It's the easiest sport by far to gamble on. It creates its gambling. It's only once a week. If there was 81 football games, they're not getting ratings every game.
I mean, also, if there were 81 football games, the players would all be injured because you couldn't play 81 football games.
Yes, if there was 81 football games, every single receiver would be posting Cracker of the Week on. But football is just so much more inducive. Where like I can go to your house or whatever to watch the Giants and the Jets on a Sunday. You're not going on a Tuesday night probably to somebody's house to watch the Knicks or the Rangers on a random game in the city. So football is just so much more inducive to getting the ratings just because of so many things about it. And also it's the only sport I know of that is a much better product to watch on TV than in person.
Way better. Way better. It's like, it's not even close. I mean, look, I go to Jet games because I have connections. I go to a lot, and I always have like box seats. And I'm connected to a suite, and at least in basketball, the good thing about basketball is that like weather is not an issue. You don't have to worry about it being freezing cold or getting rained on. Even if you go, it doesn't matter when you go because you're indoors. Baseball, weather could be an issue, but games do get rained out. Mm-hmm. But in football, you play in all conditions. So you could just be sitting there in the rain watching a football game, and it's a miserable experience. And like a lot of people, like there's a lot of fans of like cold weather teams that like wear 5 layers in like 0-degree weather, and you could see your breath at these games. I'm like, to me, that's just not worth it. I'd rather watch it on my couch. Like, to me, it's not worth it, especially in football where unless it's a night game, there's a whole bunch, and sometimes even then, there's a whole bunch of other games going on at the same time that I also want to watch.
Well, and even then, like I went to a Giants Monday Night Football game a couple years ago where Geno Smith was starting for the Seahawks, and then Drew Lock took over, and it's like, what did he get hurt? Did he get benched? I don't know because I'm not watching it on TV. Or even we saw each other at a Jet Bill game that was a Monday Night Football game, and that
was the coffee game.
Yes,
and that was by the way, that was unbelievable. By the way, MetLife Stadium has cartoonishly bad customer service. Cartoonishly bad.
It's not great. But the point is that play ended on an interception, but that was like, for me, it was like hard to even understand what was going on at first. Like it looked like it was just an incomplete pass, and then they were celebrating, but like that stuff you don't really realize sometimes when there's no yellow line, which is important. When you're in person,
it really is though, because you don't have to do the math in your head.
I feel like there's half the times where I'm like, oh my God, like they're nowhere close, and it's like 3rd and 2, and then sometimes I'm like, oh, I think he got that, and it's like it's 3rd and 10 or something. That's like, okay. And there's sometimes a lot of times like where there might be a big play or whatever, and you don't know when you're in person that there was a flag thrown.
Right. And also, I was there for the Garrett Wilson catch game, and the atmosphere was pretty good. Like I enjoyed it, like witnessing the atmosphere of Jet fans when we had a little glimmer of hope for the season. But I had no idea. Like, I could barely tell what happened. I could barely tell what happened in that catch. I thought for sure he was out, but I could barely see it. Moving the Goalposts is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, rubbing your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And now back to the show. I do want to talk a little bit about Aaron Rodgers on the Steelers. And a lot of people are, by the way, Colin Cowherd, and I'm a big fan of Colin Cowherd. I want to preface that. But I saw him talking about, like, he's really big on comparing Rodgers to Stafford. I don't know if you noticed that. And he was talking about the other day, well, if Stafford wins one more Super Bowl, we're going to view Stafford and Rodgers totally differently. And I think, and he was saying that, like, he was making the argument that, like, Stafford is better at the end of his career and was better in college, which, by the way, who cares about who's better in college? Kareem was a better college player than Michael Jordan. Nobody uses that.
I mean, Aaron Rodgers didn't really even have a great college career, so who gives a shit? Like,
Well, neither did Tom Brady. So who cares about that? But I remember him talking, but he also said at the very end, Stafford would be much better than Rodgers at the end. But it's like he's talking about it like they're the same age. Stafford is a full 4 years younger than Aaron Rodgers. 4 years ago, Rodgers was like a top 5 quarterback in the league.
Correct.
Like, I don't even to me, first of all, it's like saying that, if Stafford wins one more Super Bowl, his legacy would be that much better. It would almost be like saying, well, if LeBron wins 3 more titles, he's going to be way better than Michael Jordan.
Right.
It's not easy to win another Super Bowl. I'm $50 million away from having $50 million more dollars.
So I have 3 things about Rodgers that I think is, and I'm a fan. So, I'll preface by saying that 3 things that I want to say. First thing is this. Not once, we have to remember this, not once while he was on the Packers, once did they draft a position player in the first round. Not once. So let's remember that. Now, Stafford, and not to take anything away from Stafford, but the years that he was in Detroit, he didn't have a good team, but he had the best, maybe one of the greatest receivers ever to play in the conversation. And it's not even about Stafford, but it's about Rodgers' legacy. So let's look at that first. And the Packers were in contention every year. Yes, they only won 1 Super Bowl. Yes, they only went to 1 Super Bowl. But they were there a lot of times. And they didn't have a good team in terms of offensive weaponry. I mean, Brett Favre's offensive weaponry was way better than Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah.
Number 2, at the Jets, the first season, he tore his ACL on the in the 4th play. That team makes the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers. I'm sorry, they do. They should have made the playoffs with Zach Wilson. And we don't really know what would have happened, but I do think that team would have made some damage. They had a really, really good defense. I mean, really good defense. They were really good. They beat the Bills that year at MetLife. They should have beat the Chiefs at MetLife. They beat the Eagles. They were a good team. The second year, they started off 2-3. They were 1 or what were they? 2 and whatever. They were 2-3, and they were 1 game back of the division. And they fired the head coach the 5th game into the season and put a guy who couldn't coach Pee Wee football as a head coach in. I mean, just a dreadful coach. Aaron Rodgers had a good season last season. He did. He was by Jet standards, he was great.
And by not only by Jet standards, by 40-year-old recovering from an Achilles injury standards.
And his also what they did now I don't know if this is a full excuse for some of the players, but what they did by firing Saleh and putting Ulbrich in was fucked the head coaching position and then fucked the defensive coaching position. It was one of the stupidest moves, I think. Honestly, it's one of the stupidest in-season coaching moves I've ever seen in my life. And Saleh is not a good coach, but he's Vince Lombardi compared to Ulbrich. Third thing, the Steelers just gave away their best receiver. So, again, Rodgers is getting into this fit. In football, different than any other sport. Baseball, maybe a little bit, but football systems matter more than anything else. And
it matters way more than any other sport.
Who you have on the staff. Does anyone actually think, I know that there are people that are 49ers fans that might think this, but there's people that think that Brock Purdy is even close to elite quarterback. Not even close. He was the last pick of the draft. He's in a great system.
Right.
He's in a great system. Brock Purdy has been to as many Super Bowls as Aaron Rodgers. Is Brock Purdy anywhere near Aaron Rodgers? Of course not. But he's in a great system. Rodgers has been in a terrible system. He had Mark McCarthy, who's not a good coach. He never got offensive help. He was, I think, nothing you can do about the Achilles injury, but I think he was not the greatest treated in the Jets, who are a horribly inept organization. And I think here he's coming back to a team that is not great. They gave away their best receiver. They're in a really, really good division, especially two teams in the division.
They have two top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL in their
Well,
division.
what I was about to say was they're in a division right now where Aaron Rodgers is the third quarterback in the division.
Yeah.
I mean, which is nuts. You have two guys who, I mean, you have Lamar Jackson, who's definitely MVP caliber. I think that if the Bengals had a better defense and they had won a couple more games, that Burrow, with what he put up, could have seriously been in the MVP conversation. So he's in a really good division. He has a team that basically their ownership and is good with the fact that Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season, but has lost in the first round of the playoffs 8 straight years or something like that. So
because Mike Tomlin has to be like the most overrated coach in the NFL. He's so overrated.
Okay, first of all, also he hasn't had a losing season. Yes, okay, but they count 9 and 7, 8 and 8. Also, they added an extra game to give you the 9 wins, and he's got killed. Not only does he lose in the first round of the playoffs, he hasn't been close. But also, they added another playoff team that helped him get into the playoffs all those years.
I feel like Mike Tomlin is the only head coach that often gets praised for mediocrity.
Right.
Like, you could have said that, like, people talk about him not having losing seasons. I mean, you could say the same thing about Marvin Lewis when he was the Bengals head coach. He didn't have a whole lot. Like, I'm pretty sure most of those years were winning seasons, and they made the playoffs. They just didn't win playoff games. The same thing could have been said about Marvin Lewis. The thing is, the Steelers are just not an organization that likes to fire head coaches. Right. That's the thing. If Mike Tomlin was like the Jets head coach, they would have fired him.
They've only had 3 head coaches in the last 50 years or something, 40 years, something like that. They've only had 3 head coaches. So, yeah, they don't like to fire head coaches, but it's how much can it go on? And no, so I don't think that they're going to be. I think it depends what someone's definition of work is. I mean, are the Steelers going to compete? Yeah. For the playoffs, yeah. But are they going to compete for a championship? No.
And by the way, last year, they were one of the best teams in the NFL, and then they totally collapsed.
Yes.
They collapsed after Thanksgiving.
I don't want to hear that, which they did a couple years ago, too. The COVID year, they were 10-0 or something, and then finished 10-6. And also, everyone must have known that Rodgers, I think it's bullshit that people didn't know where Rodgers was going, because we don't know. We think Rodgers might retire, and the first game of the season is Steelers-Jets at the Jets. Come on now. Come on. And
Packers, it always works out for the NFL. It always works out for the NFL.
But I'm saying I think it was, despite what sports shows are saying, it was known he was going to the Steelers.
But I don't think, but apparently Rodgers was the Steelers' third choice. Their first choice was Stafford, which, okay, right now I would take Stafford over Rodgers, obviously. But their second choice, they wanted to keep Fields.
The biggest problem. Sorry,
I'd much rather have Rodgers over Justin Fields. Are you kidding me?
Well, you'll find out. But you'll find out this year.
Yeah. Who will win this? Who will win the Jets-Rodgers battle? And I think Rodgers will win that, clearly.
I tell you what, though, I don't love Stafford as in a cold weather city. So I'm not a big fan of that. But yeah, so they say he was the third option. But also, I mean, the third option, but he kind of acts like he's like the way that he just is like lead. I kind of hate what he does as well. And I'm a fan of him, but with too much with that, I'm going to take time to make my decision, which is basically what he told the Giants, which is fair enough that he told the Giants this, that he said, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm not sure what my decision is going to be. And then they moved on to somebody else, which is fair enough that he told them, but it's also like he did the same thing with the Jets.
I've never seen any athlete take so long to make decisions.
No. And I didn't think he was actually going to retire. I think, he wants something. I think that just there was no market for him with a team that is going to compete. And frankly, he has to admit, like, some of the fact that there was no market for him with a team that was going to compete is kind of some of his own fault. Because the fact that he is so talkative on McAfee, the fact that he's had some issues in the locker room falls on him as well.
Right. And it's also just, I feel like, what I can't stand about, and I think this is very much true about LeBron, people use personal feelings to attack them as players or their ability as players. You know what I mean? Like, people criticize Aaron Rodgers for only winning 1 Super Bowl.
Right.
How many other quarterbacks get criticized for that? Nobody says that about Favre or about Breeze. He gets criticized for winning 1 Super Bowl more than some great quarterbacks get criticized for winning no Super Bowls.
Right.
Like it's obviously like the only other quarterback that was judged that way was Peyton Manning until he miraculously won that second Super Bowl, which they won in spite of him, not because of him,
Right.
which everybody seems to forget.
Correct.
And I just can't stand when people can't put their personal bias aside and just look at it strictly from a football standpoint.
Which is why we have to. But the Peyton Manning thing is a perfect example of why it's systems that matter in football so much more than anything else, and who you have defensively. And like you said, Peyton Manning, despite of him, he was not great, and that year, and that's why it matters so much. I mean, systems matter so much, and context matters. I mean, just looking at that stuff around Rodgers that I just explained, that context matters. And what could have been, I mean, I do think that he got a raw deal of the Jets. I think the first year was nobody's fault. I think it was unfortunate, and it's an unfortunate fact of life and sports. But the second year, I think he was given, and you have a legitimately 17-year-old walking around taking the game ball from the coach after his first win and giving it to Garrett Wilson and saying that someone shouldn't get traded because of his Madden ratings. There's bigger problems there than who's the quarterback. And they had a decent quarterback. And I honestly think, I think we've talked about this on the show before. I honestly think they made a mistake going they were so heavy to where, according to now, there's two sides to every story, and I think the story that Rodgers told is probably a little bit exaggerated about his meeting that he had with them.
But I think story that I also think the opposite is true, where when the story that was reported that he begged, I think that's also very exaggerated.
I think it was in the middle. So I think he said it was a 5-minute meeting. It was probably closer to like an hour or something, where they had probably like an hour meeting, but he thought he was going to be there for days or something. And I think that, I don't think it was as quick as that, but yeah, I don't think he begged, but I do believe that they said, we're moving on and whatever, which I don't know. I didn't agree with. I didn't love. I honestly thought that when Justin Fields got signed, that he was signed to be sort of a backup to somebody. And I think they're in limbo, and it's tough. I don't know. You could tell me as a Jet fan. I mean, Giants are in the same way, but the Giants have won 2 Super Bowls in the last, so whatever. But I don't know how you could just be like, this team hasn't made the playoffs in 15 years, but now here we are again, where we're sort of back to square one, and we don't have a quarterback that's going to be long-term. And the Jets are just so poorly run, in my opinion. I mean, the Giants are very poorly run, so, but I just think the Jets are awfully run.
They are, but at least the Giants have championships to show for it,
right.
So they couldn't have been awfully run for that long, whereas the Jets, it was for 55 years, 56 years. They've been horribly run. I think the difference is that Jet fans are more willing to acknowledge that their team is awfully run than Giant fans. Like, I feel like there's a lot more, Giant fans have a lot more, like the Giants have a lot more cheerleaders for their front office, it seems like, and for their head coach, whoever it is at the time, or their quarterback, whoever it is at the time, than the Jets. Whereas the Jets, I think we're more of a fan base that is like, the front office is a disaster, the head coach is a disaster, the quarterback's a disaster. I feel like the Giants have a lot more cheerleaders, if that makes sense. And that's because they have more of a history of winning. And also because I think that it's also because Giant fans are also Yankee fans.
Correct. I was about to say
that. Jet fans are also Met fans. So there's a little bit more of a pattern. So I think the psychology is slightly.
Well, and I think, the Rangers are the same way to an extent, where I think a lot of people that root for the Rangers think that the Rangers have won one cup in like close to 100 years. So but I think that Ranger fans think that they're like the cream of the crop, like franchise, when the Florida Panthers have more titles in the last recently. But I agree with that. And I think also, like, if Aaron Rodgers had tore his ACL on the Giants, like, there would have been such shock and sadness, which there was shock and sadness. But I think a lot of Jets fans were like, yeah, of course he tore his ACL. Like, like I remember they were watching it on Barstool, and one of the guys was like, this is unbelievable, when he tore his ACL. And the guy KFC from Barstool turned around. He's like, or is it the most believable thing in the history of the world? Which it kind of is, like, that he did that. But I will say, like, when we talk about Salah, someone said this, I think it was on First Take, or it could have been ESPN Radio about the Tennessee Titans. So the Tennessee Titans fired Mike Vrabel because Mike Vrabel wanted to be the GM, and they liked their GM. And the next year, now Mike Vrabel got hired at the Patriots, and they fired their GM. So they could have kept Vrabel. The point he was making, and I think it's a very salient point leading to what the Jets did with Saleh, is losing organizations are losing because they make terrible decisions.
Right.
And
it's the same thing running.
Terrible decisions. And I have to say, I'm very worried because I do believe that Nick Wright theory, which I think we've seen, that the Knicks were good because of the Sphere in Las Vegas. So just for people who haven't seen it that are watching, the theory is that James Dolan built a Sphere in Las Vegas for the last 5 years, and he was not paying attention to the Knicks. And now the Sphere is done, and the Knicks got good, and he immediately fired Thibodeau, which I didn't think was the worst move. But if they bring in Jason Kidd, I'm not a fan of that move. And I am worried about. I am actually worried about him coming back with the Sphere. We need a we need a Sphere part 2 or something. We need something desperately.
Yeah, no, I think that it's like, I think the Knicks they're almost like the Soviet Union of like basketball teams, where it's like when the dictatorship is on, the economy's terrible, and then without the dictators, it's like everything flourishes. Well, so like that's like what the Knicks are.
Well, we might need now. We don't want anyone to die, but there was this Netflix documentary about when someone put cyanide in Tylenol tablets, and Johnson & Johnson had to go into like full defense mode. We need something that is going to tank Johnson & Johnson to get Woody Johnson to move.
Yeah.
I thought Trump winning was going to help that, but he didn't end up becoming the ambassador.
Well, it didn't make a difference the first time around when Trump was president the first time and he was in the administration. His son just ran.
It's true. They did hire some bad coaches.
I guess the difference between Woody Johnson and James Dolan is that at least James Dolan hires people that are competent, that he knows are more competent than he is.
Right.
Whereas Woody Johnson just gives it to his son.
And his son was that story to me about like the Madden ratings thing was whatever. It was stupid. But the bigger story to me was when he took the game ball away from the coach that won his first game.
Yeah.
To Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, that was nuts.
And why, not for nothing, but like, why is the owner's son involved in the locker room in any way? Like,
it shouldn't be.
That's 17, not like Hal Steinbrenner or something that's like 40. Like, it's a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's just like,
look,
they are.
We've known each other since we were younger than 17, and we were both idiots at 17. Like 17-year-olds are idiots. Like,
right.
Like, I was an idiot at 17. I couldn't have done anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an idiot now too, but now like but we do see it more rationally. And the crazy thing is, I think in the time that we've known each other before we were 17, the Jets haven't made the playoffs. I don't think I've known you since the Jets.
Yeah, I was a minor. I didn't know you at all the last time the Jets made the playoffs. That's how long it's been half my life. And
in that time, the Giants, who we've all admitted are a joke of an organization right now, have made the playoffs twice. I mean, the Giants made the playoffs with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, like, it's true.
It just shows you how easy it is to make the playoffs. And I do think that Jet team would have made the playoffs. But even the fact that it was like, even the fact that they were like, oh my God, Aaron Rodgers is gone, and now we have Zach Wilson. That was your number 2 pick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That was your guy. Like, and the Jets also, like, talk about the Madden ratings. I actually think the Jets kind of drafted Zach Wilson because of a video on the internet where he made that throw across his body. You know the one I'm talking about? I do. Also, like, I kind of hate those pro days. Like, a guy made a good throw when there was no defenders,
not even wearing
on the field, no clock, nobody rushing him. Like, okay. It's like there's videos of Ben Simmons making 15 straight threes in an open gym. Like,
yeah.
Okay, like, let's see him do it in a game. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Anyway, that's our show this week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Liam Barwick. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart. You can follow Liam at LiamMTGP. You can follow this show across social media at MTGP ETB. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network at ETB Network. I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Liam Barwick. I'll be back next week. See you then.